Hello everyone, my name is Michael Dorado, and today I'm going to talk about dyslexia as a learning disability. Dyslexia is defined as a specific and significant impairment in reading abilities, unexplainable by any kind of deficit in general intelligence, learning opportunity, general motivation, or sensory acuity. Dyslexia is a language-based disability and it affects five main areas: spoken language, reading, spelling, writing, and pronouncing words. For the spoken language component, symptoms of late learning to learning how to talk, difficulty pronouncing words, difficulty following directions, even difficulty with learning the alphabet, songs, and nursery rhymes. For the reading component, they usually will have difficulty learning to read, phonological awareness, identifying rhyming words or syllables in words, remembering names, and omitting common short words in sentences. And for the third component, the written language actually, they'll have difficulty putting ideas on paper. There'll be a lot of spelling mistakes and difficulty proofreading. And essentially, the breakdown of dyslexia is the following symptoms. The main ones that you will encounter, or they will encounter, for those that have dyslexia, will be identifying words, remembering spellings, remembering what they have read. Sometimes they'll have to go back and reread numerous times, and even then that may be a struggle for them. Hence, there'll be a low vocabulary knowledge. And that's coming from poor reading skills. Usually what will happen is they'll have a difficult time recalling information, and hence that'll lead to low vocabulary, and that's all stems from poor reading skills. Why is this so important? What is the main significance in society? Well, to sum it up in a couple of words, reading skills or literary skills are very, very crucial. Those skills must be met. Otherwise, it'll have quite a difficult time. The two concerns is lack of skills. And what do I mean by lack of skills? Many teachers, some very well seasoned, were not trained in special needs area of education. They seem to be aware of the problem, but did not receive any formal training. And I'm not saying all teachers, I'm saying the majority of. And dyslexia is considered an epidemiology in our society where literacy skills, as I mentioned, are very, very, very important. And the key to all of this is having an effective classroom. Learning starts from the classroom, from kindergarten all the way up to the secondary level. And what we want to have is an inclusive classroom. And an inclusive classroom is going to include both normal and disabled students. They will not be segregated out of the classroom. They will be together learning at the same, they may be learning at different paces, but they'll be learning together. And also the influx of student teachers were also not trained in dyslexia. So therefore we have a lot of newcomers coming into the field that are not trained in with any professional development, and therefore may not recognize the symptoms of dyslexia, and therefore may not be able to intervene or provide the appropriate services that these students may require. Also, we want to have teachers that are taught by trained, experienced teachers and other personnel through a variety of professional development. And this professional development will give them the necessary training, as I said before, to recognize certain symptoms with dyslexia. The theory of dyslexia, this is one of the main theories behind this whole thing. It's thought that dyslexia typically results from a deficit in the phonological component of language, that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities with effective classroom instruction. When I say phenological, I mean contrastive relationships among speech sounds that constitute the fundamental components of a language. And secondary consequences may include difficulties in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede the growth of vocabulary, which I said earlier, low vocabulary, and general background knowledge. And phonological dyslexia is extreme difficulty reading that is a result of phonological impairment, and that is the ability to manipulate the basic sounds of language. So when we say phonological, we're just looking at the relationships among speech sounds that make up the language that we're speaking of. In this case, it's the English language, since we're talking about that. The theory is called the Phenological Deficit theory. That's the formal name of it. And there are several components of it, okay? And one of them is poor phonological awareness, okay? Again, the relationships of the speech sounds that make up the language almost completely ignored here. Poor verbal short-term memory is a major issue. Slow lexical retrieval, and what I mean by that is it's the process of getting from a concept to spoken words. So when you see a conceptual idea, they'll have a difficult time transcribing that or transforming that into words that will explain that conceptual idea. And phonological deficit is associated with the abnormality in the left hemisphere language system and abnormal responses in the left inferior frontal region with increased activations. When there's increased activation, okay, that's where the abnormal responses come into play. And the left parietal and temporal regions and the left inferior temporal occipital regions with reduced activation in those areas when there's phonological and reading tasks going on. So that's the parts of the brain that are impacted, and that's how they can tell based on brain activity in those regions of the brain. And additionally, the model also predicts environmental factors, and such factors as orthography, which is conventional spelling of the language, a variety of teaching methods, okay, which is why it's so important to have these newcomers coming into the field well trained, so that their teaching methods can sort of go in line with picking up symptoms of dyslexia and accommodating those particular students, and literacy values, which all have a strong impact on the acquisition of any language. Okay, so that's extremely important to keep in mind. Now, there are various symptoms across various age groups, depending on what age group we're referring to. I decided to talk about preschool and kindergarten symptoms when they're at that level, okay, and adolescent symptoms during their adolescent period, and also what are the symptoms in the adults. So those are the three areas that I decided to talk about. Let's see, the first one. So preschool and kindergarten symptoms. Some of the typical symptoms that will manifest if you are a well-trained teacher, you should be able to recognize, at that grade level, they're going to learn a lot of nursery rhymes and They're going to, these particular students are going to have trouble learning those nursery rhymes. Okay, they're going to tend to forget, and even with repetitiveness, they're still going to not retain those nursery rhymes. Um, Also going to have difficulty learning and remembering the names of the letters in the alphabet. So you teach them the alphabet. They may skip some letters or just totally, forget about them. And that's going to constitute for a very difficult time learning how to read or just putting basic words together as they progress into the first, second grade at the elementary level. And they're going to have some difficulty recognizing letters in his or her own name. Okay, so that's going to pose a problem as well. They're just not going to recognize a particular letter. So spelling of his or her name is going to be nearly very difficult or impossible. Mispronounces familiar words, almost like baby talk, kind of incoherent and not really clear. And also doesn't recognize rhyming patterns. And rhyming patterns like bat, cat, rat, take, bake, cake, things like that. Rhyming patterns like that. Also, an inability to learn to associate letters with sounds and does not understand that words come apart. They break apart, like prefixes, suffixes, the root word. That actually gives you the meaning of the words if you know those suffixes and prefixes. Just like dyslexia, dys meaning difficult and lexia meaning speech. And another area that I decided to do is adolescent symptoms. Adolescent symptoms will include difficulty reading, and that includes reading aloud, slow and labor-intensive reading and writing. So what seems to be a breeze for normal people will be very, very laborious to them. Problem spelling and whether the words are difficult or easy or average, that usually be across the board, especially with misspelled common words, which are already difficult in the first place. So imagine the difficulty a person with dyslexia has. Avoiding activities that involve reading or writing, for that matter, and mispronouncing names and words and problems retrieving words. And the last group that I decided to talk about was symptoms in adults. Dyslexia does not go away, it continues through a lifetime. Slow reading speed and or trouble including small words or parts of longer words when reading out loud. So if they're write or read, they may skip a word altogether. Another typical symptom would be a hard time remembering abbreviations. Abbreviations can be challenging in itself, but imagine what a person with dyslexia has, trying to remember the letters, associating the letters with words, and they may get the words backwards or reversed in order. Difficulty comprehending or retaining information they read. So they may have to go back and reread several times, maybe even more, just depending on the content that they're reading. And also a tendency to avoid reading both out loud and to themselves. And also a lot of frustration when reading to themselves or out loud. I think I've said that already. And this will create a lot of low self-esteem toward reading and writing. They may tend to withdraw from it, get very, very anxious when those two words are mentioned or if they're put on the spot, and they may withdraw altogether. So as you can see, this particular disability can be very debilitating, and it's for a lifetime. So it's just a matter of managing those symptoms and learning to cope with them as you proceed throughout your life. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and hope that it was very informative, and I want to thank you for watching.